Hope you had a good morning and good night. I think I'm from the European Commission. I work in the Internet of Things. So we are a cross-cutting unit dealing with different areas, research, innovation under Horizon Europe, but also the implementation of data spaces in mobility, agri, and energy. So who of you know the programs of the Commission who are involved? Okay, some of them are not. So, and who of you know the data spaces or have direct projects on data spaces already? Oh, quite a lot. Good. So I don't have to explain then maybe too much about that, but what happened is we are in the transition phase of a new Commission, and we're changing strategy. So recently there was a report by Mario Draghi on new policies, putting competitiveness in the center. So far in the last Commission, we talked about the Green Deal, and now, we're moving towards green and competitiveness. So how to leverage innovation and what we have in Europe, how to make business out of that, how to increase strength and competitiveness, how to combine decarbonization and competitiveness. So there are different gaps, I would say, in the report, and one of them is identification of frontier technologies, IoT, Internet of Things, artificial intelligence is all over, but also claiming that edge computing is quite absent for key players like telecom in Europe. So that's why the report is quite important. But it's a guidance document, so we have to see which of the commissioners will take it up and will prioritize the actions. So from the past Commission, we had the Digital Decade, and there already you see the notion of edge nodes, the target of 10,000 edge nodes to be implemented as sort of a new infrastructure. We know, the business of cloud, of hyperscalers. We know a long time, about the difficulties of having interoperability of Internet of Things. And there's a new way, what we call an edge paradigm, which is sort of a new infrastructure, which bridges the data services in the cloud and the physical services linked to the connected physical devices of IoT in the middle. So it's an orchestration, but it has a new paradigm. It's a new paradigm because it uses data technologies, cloud technologies like virtualization. It's easier to have more agile systems. And the challenge here is the orchestration across what we call the computing continuum. So from cloud services where we have high capacity computing towards connected nodes with limited functionality and computing capacity towards close to the point of action devices where you have real-time computing capacity, you may have intelligence, and you have that, what we call the edge computing paradigms. Now that was supported by the Commission, under Horizon Europe. More than 300 million have been spent over there in order to explore projects across the cloud computing continuum. So here again, we see, at the moment, there is no key player who can solve all that problems because this orchestration is quite complex. Not only one company can do it alone, and we see the challenge of system integration over there, combining embedded systems and control, paradigms of Internet of Things and connected objects, together with cloud computing paradigms, technologies, simulation, digital twins, AI in the future, and orchestration. So we need sort of companies joining forces, working in partnerships on what we call a platform economy. So they have to take a system-level approach in order to meet real-time constraints and the demands of physical processes, from hardware of smart devices to operating systems at device and system level, towards middleware and abstraction and application software. So here we see the opportunity, what you know already, what you heard from eventually connected cars. It's more functions and software over the air, reconfiguring systems on the fly, making systems more agile, putting systems in place which are not ready for operation but will get functionality later, where you separate software and hardware. So we see more and more tendency towards software-based systems. And most important, why we talk about platform economy and functionality, we want to avoid vendor lock-in. So we talk about open architectures, open APIs and interfaces, and that is the wisdom of all of our projects. So, what does it mean for the open source? We see there are many initiatives already going on in the area of edge computing. What we need on open source is, I think, before having more projects, we need that open source projects somehow do a mapping across the computing continuum. This is just an example, you know, starting from the cloud stack, the cloud architectures, using containers for the virtualization and downloading more functionality. The orchestration, we have a lot of already projects going on. And then, you know, to devise different open source projects along their main functionality, which could collect data, streaming like Kafka, processing, storing data, retrieving, or analyzing large amounts of streaming data. So I think if you're part of an open source project, if you want to launch a project, I think what we from the Commission would really appreciate that you do a bit of first of mapping again. You know, where do you focus on? What part of the computing continuum you are targeting in order to see, you know, how is the interface to other projects and what is somehow around your open source project. What we did recently, and actually this year and beginning of next year, we support IoT platforms. Again, you know, this platform approach in the center, we spend more about 45 million euro on IoT platforms to demonstrate this orchestration across the computing continuum, but also across different application sectors. I think that is one of the key elements, is that edge computing is, on the one hand, it's not application agnostic, but it has to orchestrate also across different application sectors. And that's quite important because it's not only one sector driving edge computing, and we need that leverage factor across different sectors, which is the core of a platform approach also. So a platform approach to share hardware and foster an open ecosystem, which is in the center. Projects will start beginning of next year, and there's a support action, what is called CI Sphere. We will support this discussion about, you know, how to link to open source projects, either inside of the pilots we are financing, or projects which have started outside, which could be sourced in. And that is a key element of the platforms and on the pilots, which is we have a flexible component, meaning we have open calls, up to 20%, which meaning 8 million are allocated to open calls. Again, that's an opportunity to have new use cases, to have small and medium-sized companies, but also to attract open source developers if you do it right. So it's the task of the support action also to support these open source communities, to identify which is the most critical ones across the path of success, which is the most convenient one, which is the most dynamic one. So what does it mean if you talk about an open ecosystem for our pilots? Yes, we need to increase the size of the ecosystem, meaning, you know, they have to promote what they do in the pilots, where are they open, where do they have open interfaces, where they want to attract, already have open source components in their approach. It requires a consensus on interoperability. That's most important because I think if you don't have an open hook, an open interface where you can contribute, there's no value of the solution developed in the pilot or demonstrated. So we need this openness, we need the documentation of open APIs, we need eventually open standards, and we have to communicate that in the right way. In the past we had examples like from smart cities where we created this notion of MIMs, minimal interoperability mechanisms, to focus on the most critical path for implementation of a smart city solution. And that guided the people, you know, developing solutions quite a lot, got a lot of visibility, was one of the success factors. So let's see if we can redo some of these positive and successful promotion exercises for edge platforms which could leverage an open source community. So that's why I'm here, that's why we have Eclipse in the projects as well, and that's why it's a critical path for us as well. Yet to be a bit more illustrative, what is behind, as I talked about, cross-sector, and one of the challenges, for instance, is to combine, for instance, charging of electric vehicles with energy services. It's clear, you know, if you plug in your electric vehicle, you need energy. It's very evident for heavy trucks. They need a lot of energy in a small fraction of time. But I think there's a general problem. The general problem of linking different sectors, because every stakeholders work in their own domain, linking energy and mobility, linking it to buildings and living with the heat pumps, linking that in a community of a quartier or a smart city. So it expands, no? From small things to big things. And again, you know, you need this cross-sectoral view. You need some binding elements, some bridging elements. And we made a study, which was done by Fraunhofer, which was published this year, showing, you know, where are the gaps and what are opportunities, you know, how to enable that cross-cutting element. And one of the key elements of orchestration across different sectors is data sharing. You know, passing data flows across the different devices, systems, in order to have data services, but also, you know, to orchestrate that you consume energy at the right moment in time. So it's very simple in your minds, but in the implementation, it's quite a challenge. And that's why we, again, back to the platform strategy. Yes, we need standards on data. So I'm very happy that Boris Otto is over here. We need standards on interface and interoperability, standards for the edge, how you abstract, how you do virtualization, how you document your open APIs, what are the key open source building blocks, highlight, promote, visualize, and put it on top of your agenda. You have to bang the drums. With the building blocks, you have to map it to the use cases. What are the key driving use cases? Which are the stakeholders behind that? At the end of the day, they said, you know, the core element always is, you know, this data hub or data channel, how you aggregate data, how you share data. And it's becoming more important in the context of artificial intelligence. We have more and more as well where we see computing capacity allows data aggregation and artificial intelligence at the edge. So it's unavoidable and it will happen. But the starting point, again, is the data. And once you abstract from that one, you have an open interface. There are plenty of apps which can be developed on the fly. And that's one of the secrets or one of the success factors of what we call IoT cloud edge platforms. To be more focused on the data side, as I said, we're implementing data spaces in different sectors. One is energy. Insieme is the project which will be launched beginning of next year. Along the lines of Digital Energy Action Plan and the European Data Strategy, which shows we have two entities of the Commission working here. It's DGNR, which is pretty much focused on regulation of data access and data availability, as well as DG Connect. So a common European data space is one of the, what we call the elements who say, well, you know, can we create a blueprint where the people from different sectors, first of all, the private companies and private consumers who develop applications for the home or for the private side, what we call behind the meter, and the the energy operators can work together alongside. And this blueprint already is a mixture between regulated data formats like SIM, and private data. Then we need standardized formats and frameworks. I think that's one of the key elements nowadays. With the ontologies, we focused on that in the past. We know that, you know, with the new capabilities of AI and semantic capabilities, ontology is not the big deal anymore because you can convert very quickly, but it's still, you know, at the forefront. So this one will start with pilots in 16 countries, and we hope, you know, that we can mobilize a sufficient number of stakeholders. I will not go much into the details of the data space because Boris is coming afterwards. But again, you know, at the start of the data space, which is sort of the baseline, it's a concept, it's a framework. It's not essentially a data hub or a data infrastructure. You have to identify what is the crucial data. That's all coming again, you know, if you have projects for implementation of data spaces, what is the critical path, what is the crucial data, who is the data holder. And then we go along the line of the circle, and then, the big question always is, and I will cut it short, if you identify the data holder, does the data holder have a data strategy? If not, it's useless to talk about data spaces because, he has to do his homework. He has to clean the data, he has to create the data, he has to invest into a data strategy, a data infrastructure, and if not, it's difficult to talk about data spaces because data space is an enabling for data sharing, but if you don't have a real starting point, it will not work, and then you go along that line. I don't go much into details, you have it later. So a bit of an overview of what we are doing. We work at the cross-section of policy and technical implementation. That's quite important. In the last commission, we put the data strategy in the focus. Data Governance Act, Data Markets, Data Service Act, the Data Act. So a lot of legislation happened, and we tried to map that to a technical implementation. It's quite important because the regulatory framework which is given here is quite generic still. It gives guidance. Data Act is a mandate for data sharing, but doesn't give you the implementation. So we work on the implementation with the Data Space Support Center, with the funding of sectoral data spaces in the different pilots. You've seen that. And also we're working on a technical middleware solution. The key element, if you develop technical solutions, that's the guiding principle, is that we make it modular. That it's, that we have different building blocks. The building blocks are somehow a part of a blueprint, part of standardized. Most important, they have to be reusable. And I think we have seen a lot of work done by Gaia X on these building blocks and how to make these connectors. And what we're struggling at the moment, for instance, to give you one example, is the ID management. No? Identity management, I would say, well, we take a building block, yes. But each of the different groups of stakeholders start to do their own ID and building block and infrastructure. Give you one example, it's the digital product passport. Yes, we need an identification of products, good. Another example is the energy flexibility register. If you want to connect your solar panel, you need to register. So you have one device, and then all of a sudden, you have different ID requirements. Yes, we need a building block, that's fine, but you also, have to simplify that we don't multiplicate the infrastructure. So can we work on a technical framework, but we're not yet there in order to have a harmonized, simplified approach, for instance, on ID management across Europe. That's a bit of part of the new commission. The Data Space Support Center is a key element in order to orchestrate the different implementations, and you will hear talk later on. And again, the blueprint and the building blocks is in the core, because that gives you already a guidance on the implementation. So you have a starting point, you get a starting package, you can start implementing, you can see the complexity before you go to real life and commercial applications. So I stay with an overview. Our key means for the implementation is what we call the Digital Euro program, a deployment program on artificial intelligence, data and cloud, and there you see the implementation of the different data spaces where we cover energy, agriculture, mobility. We are close touch with manufacturing, there are others. The technical implementation, we are in support and coordination action. A development inside our directorate on our middleware platforms and building blocks. And we have to see, that we shape these building blocks and that we put it, that we follow up the implementation and see, that we improve it continuously in order to make it handsome, modular, and really, really usable. Before ending, I want to give you a bit of an insight on the mobility data space. Project is called 3D Space for Mobility. It's quite advanced, meaning that we identified the critical path for the implementation, the different types of data sharing, the data holders, and the mobility data space is quite complex in that sense. Yes, stakeholders with a very strong mindset and regulatory issue. But we know we have to agree on both sides. I think there's a bit of this example of the picture, the green and the blue. The blue is, I would call, the most straightforward one, the technical part, the implementation of building blocks, data models, agreement, data exchange, provenance, ID management, and so on and so forth, trust. And then you have the green one, which is more the soft ones. It's related to the governance, the business cases of the different stakeholders. And not all stakeholders have the same business case. And then how does it fit to the regulatory environment, both the digital regulatory environment and the policy and, of transport and mobility. And, I'll give you one example. Access to in-vehicle data already, is a big of a mysterium. Long discussion, the discussions are stuck. So we hope that if you can show something on the implementation, that we also get an agreement on the policy side. So here you see the ping pong between the technical implementation and the policy side, which is, needs a consensus across different stakeholders. So here a bit, the example shows of the mobility data space. You see again, the different stakeholders of critical path for mobility data. That could be the logistics data, national access points, road safety data, transport data, mobility data in the city, the vehicle data, as I mentioned, aviation data, et cetera, and each of the different stakeholders have their own view of preserving data, of collecting data, again, and that is a bit of the idea of having a virtual data warehouse where you at least you agree on data exchange formats, on common data structure or common ontologies, before you then trying to test out and demonstrate the usage of building blocks. So this is a bit of a strategy, but we are in the beginning, simply speaking. Energy data space has not started. Mobility data space just started, and we know there are also actions in other countries like Germany, and we have to see how to we link that up. Yeah.
How is Europe related to China or the USA in this development?
This is a very clear answer. I think Europe is only working in Europe because I think these stakeholders are all European stakeholders. So the data holders are all European, and they have to agree on a data strategy. If we look at China particularly, we haven't seen a strategy for open data formats where we could say, well, this is best practice. For smart cities in the past, we teamed up with Japan. Also for Japan, we haven't seen a proactive approach on an open data strategy. An open it does not mean that you're open towards the whole world, but it means if you want to have these stakeholders be working together or sharing data, you need a strategy across these agreement, the consensus. So, yeah.
Just to react on that, the Chinese government has recently identified data as the fifth production factor. What they also did, they established a so-called National Data Bureau or National Data Administration, and they are creating, say, what you mentioned in the smart city domain, certain, let's say, data sharing platforms. I think their understanding of, let's say, open data is a bit different as here in Europe, but they are, let's say, following closely what we are doing, in particular when it comes to cross-border data sharing, because many supply chains are global, and there are many, let's say, touch points for conversations to make that happen, to bridge that, and not to anticipate too much about that, Rod, but what you said. I think one of the key things is identity management also, because they will definitely come up with something different than we with the IDIS, for example. And let's see.
I've also one information regarding Gaia-X. We have reached out to Japan and Korea actually, so there is a first Gaia-X hub and digital clearinghouse in Japan and in Korea to follow. So also manufacturing X is opening and broadening the scope to an international exchange, because the trade corridors are very important for those areas. But that's a start, so we started that in the last quarter.
Yeah, I think thanks for the info. it's quite evident, no? I think if you want to have sort of an agile supply chain and not a harmonized or one proprietary platform, you need open interfaces. And it starts with the data, because we have a lot of software and softwareization of the systems. And then my last slide is, about the digital platform strategy, what we somehow support in our unit across the mobility and energy sector. Yes, we worked on an energy saving app. It's an open source and open API. Also, there will be a project called Eclipse, but it's not supported by Eclipse. But it's an open source project. Then about digital twin, which will release a lot of momentum through Gen AI. I mean, we see more and more rapid development of simulation and digital twin models. Operational digital platforms, I think that's quite important to move from the data and the software strategy towards the physical and control strategy, the system integration. And I explained the data spaces. And that's all from my side. And we had already discussion on questions, if you have more questions. Maybe to mention, we have a workshop on cross-domain standardization on the 26th of November in Brussels, where we want to flag a bit, where we are in Europe with standards, data standards and cross-sector standards, and how could we link up to international developments.